Hey book lovers, Kaylee here, and welcome back to the Enchanted Library. And with the coming of a new year comes a lot of announcements for book releases. And I have a list here of books that I am so excited for. It's not the comprehensive list, but it is a list of books that I know is coming out next year that I am super excited about. And I want to share that list with you guys because if you enjoy the books that I enjoy, you're probably going to find some books on this list that you should keep an eye out for next year. Now I do have all of these books listed in release date order, so then that way you know chronologically when each one is coming out. So without further ado, let's talk about the books that I am excited to come out in 2019. Starting in January on the 15th, I am so excited for The Gilded Wolves to come out by Roshani Chokshi. So a couple of things right off the bat about this book that gets me super amped is that it's set in Paris. It has a ragtag group of people that need to come together and stop a thing, and those are a couple of the sort of tag lines that always gets me, so I am so excited for this book. It basically follows a character who finds out that he has an inheritance, but there's also this secret order that is sort of out to get him, and he meets a ragtag group of friends who all have their own reasons for being there, and it takes place in Paris, like I said, so I'm really excited for this one to come out. Next up in January on the 22nd, we have Circle of Shadows by Evelyn Skye. A couple of the things that really got me interested in this book was the fact that it's kind of like a ninja academy, and these two friends end up infiltrating this other place. So those are a couple of the tip-offs for me that got me really excited. But like I said, it follows these two students who are basically like ninja assassins in their academy, and the time is sort of a time of peace, but while they're out sort of adventuring, they find this sect of people who are sort of catching their eye in a dangerous way. So they go undercover to infiltrate them, and they find out things about the world, and oh, I just think that this is going to be such an epic story because, hey, ninjas, assassins, going undercover, how could you not be excited for that? Next up, going into February, on the 1st, we have Smoke and Summons by Charlie Holmberg. This one stood out to me because it sounds like it's going to have a very intriguing magic system, there's going to be a strong female lead, there's going to be an adventure aspect, and just so many intriguing ideas for a new fantasy series. We start out with a girl who has these magical powers that can basically destroy most things, and she is held captive by this man who wants to use her powers for his own reasons. However, anytime that she uses her powers, it is detrimental to her life, so she doesn't want to be sort of enslaved to him forever. So she ends up going away and running away and finding this guy who has the ability to grant himself immortality for like the briefest of moments. So these two have to sort of find a way to come together to keep her alive and keep her out of harm, but she's also has this super strength inside of her, so I'm just so excited to see what comes of this new series. Next up on February 5th, we have I Owe You One by Sophie Kinsella. Now this book, honestly, any Sophie Kinsella book you can put me down, I'm going to pick it up. She's one of the only contemporary rom-com kind of writers that I will really read regardless, so I'm so excited for this book. So this one sounds like it might have a little bit of a love triangle, but it basically follows this girl who always feels like she needs to help people, and she ends up helping this one guy, and he ends up writing her an IOU, and she finds out that her friend sort of needs a job, so she takes the gentleman up on his offer of the IOU, and there ends up just being this cute little banter between them, and a bunch of IOUs end up being passed back and forth. So I just think it's going to be a really cute story. But also something that I really like about Sophia Kinsella's works is that she always integrates some sort of business aspect to it. So there's always going to be a businessman or woman, and there is something going on in their business that they need help with, but in the process of this rom-com kind of happening. So I'm very excited for a new Sophie Kinsella book. I cannot wait. Also coming out on February 5th is The Cerulean by Amy Ewing. This book has had me intrigued for several months when I found out that HarperCollins achieved the rights to publish the work, and I immediately wanted to get a copy. It sounds like such an interesting premise that is something that I haven't really heard of before, and I just cannot wait to read this one. This follows a city that is sort of in orbit around a world, but it is attached by a tether. So in this world, the city that is orbiting can go from world to world. They just have to disconnect the tether, and whoever ends up getting that sort of job is sort of like an honor. But this one girl, she wants to travel and she wants to go to the next city, but it ends up being her that has to cut the tether. So when she does so, she drops down to the world that they were attached to, and she comes into contact with all of these different beings and things that she never thought would have existed before. And she ends up figuring out that there are some nefarious plots happening in the city that she just came from that she needs to help. So I am very excited for this journey of a story, and I cannot wait for this one because it just sounds so interesting. So February 5th has a lot of books coming out apparently on that day, and this next one has been all over social media lately because the arcs have been released and they are gorgeous. But that book is Enchanted by Gita Talese. Now, one of the reasons that I'm so excited about this book is it is basically a revolution set in Paris, and the world already seems so well realized that it's just going to be so good. But basically in this world we have a girl who can practice magic, but she isn't supposed to practice magic. It is something that is considered dangerous, and she ends up being brought into this court intrigue within Versailles, and how she ends up dealing with the king and the queen and going undercover and trying to figure out a couple of things based around her family, and I'm just and also on February 5th is Stolen Time by Danielle Rollins. This one really intrigued me because it is set with dual timelines, and then it also has time travel, but instead of people from the future going into the past, it is someone from the past being brought to the future. So I just thought that that was a really nice, fun twist. So we have a girl in the early 1900s who is basically being forced into a marriage that she does not want, and she ends up running away, and in the forest she meets up with a time traveler. She does not know that at the time though, and when she sort of comes to, she is in the future, like in 2077. And there's this whole thing that is going on in the future that she obviously would have no idea about, but it turns out that she is an integral point of the plot for this almost desolated future. Can you guess the next release date that I have? February 5th, once again, we have The Antidote by Shelley Sakier. So when I initially heard about this book, I really got Healer series vibes by Marie V. Snyder, and I love that series so much. I would love to sort of read this and compare it to the Healer series almost, because I don't think that we get a lot of that type of fantasy, so I am really interested to see how this one is going to turn out. So in this world, magic again is dangerous, as it seems to be in a lot of fantasy, but this girl has the ability to heal people, but instead of using her magic because it has its costs, she has to sort of heal people with homemade remedies and that sort of thing, going really old school with it. But when she finds out that her friend and prince is sick, she needs to figure out a way, or she wants to figure out a way to heal him, and the only way to do so is by using her magic. So by risking exposing herself and risking the dangers of magic, she goes to heal him, and it sets off a whole series of events, and I just think that it is going to be such an interesting read. I love that type of a premise where you have someone who has the ability to heal, and I can't wait to read it. And again, on February 5th, this is the first sequel that I get to talk about, and that is Lady Smoke by Laura Sebastian. And this is the sequel to Ash Princess, which came out in 2018. I ended up giving about a 3.5 star to, but I really want to see the progression of the story and the journey of the characters, because without getting into what the sequel is about, the initial book, Ash Princess, follows a girl who is basically a totem of mockery for her people, because she ends up being held captive by this lord who has taken over the kingdom, and he basically, like I said, just wants to use her to get back at her people. So if there is any sort of rebellion that he hears whispers of, he uses her as punishment for that. So he ends up just sort of parading her around. She has an ash crown and it just makes soot on her face, and she's just a mockery, and it's really sad, but she has this underlying hope of rebellion within her, and she ends up being thrust into the rebellion when someone appears within the palace there to help her after 10 years. So in the wake of what happens in the first book, we have the next book, which I need to know what happens with the rebellion, because there was a reveal at the end of the first book that is just gonna obviously flip everything on its head, so cannot wait. And coming up next on February 5th, but possibly the 12th, they haven't fully confirmed the date yet, that is Watcher in the Woods by Kelly Armstrong. This is book number 4 in the Casey Duncan series, so that is one reason that I'm super excited about it. I don't read much thrillers, but this series I have absolutely loved. I've been reading it since release date of book 1, and I get excited for it every single year. I go out on release date to pick it up, and it's just, I love it so much. But again, because this is book number 4, I'm not going to get too much into it, but this series basically follows this woman who is a detective in the big city in the States, and she ends up having a friend who is put into a bad situation with an ex. So to get her out of that bad situation, she discovers that there is this town up in the Yukon that is in hiding, and they're basically there that if you can pay, they will sort of take you away from your history for a couple of years and sort of protect you. But the reason that it's so risky up there though is that literally anybody can get in. If you can pay, you can get in. So there are murderers, there are crime people there, there's just bad news bears everywhere. Plus, surrounding the town is the Yukon wilderness, which is deadly in and of itself. So Casey Duncan is now in that town, and she is helping solve any of the crimes that arise from the bad people that live there. Switching up the date to February 26th, we have The Deceivers Heart by Jennifer Nielsen. I'm excited for this one because it is the sequel to Traitor's Game. So Traitor's Game was released in 2018, and when I read it, I got super intrigued by the premise because, again, kind of like Ash Princess, you have a rebellion, you have a corrupt government system, and you need to figure out how to sort of let the people be in charge of their lives again, essentially. So you have this girl who has been sent off by her parents to sort of live in exile to protect her, but also to sort of keep her away, and she ends up coming back and getting captive, and she has to work undercover against her family for the people who captured her in order to save her friends, and it's this whole thing that ends up happening, and the romance in it is such a slow burn but good romance that I am very excited to see where it goes in the sequel, because from what I can tell of the plot, there is going to be one sort of trope or plot device that I do not like. But I am still excited to read it because I'm hoping that it's only going to be a very small thing and it's not going to last very long, but you never know. But I do want to continue on with the series, so I'm excited for the next book. And the last book that I have here coming out on February the 26th is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. So this book lately too has been all over social media because the ARCs as well have been released, and it is a tome of a book. It is massive, and it came to so many people's surprise this past year because nobody knew that Samantha Shannon was writing this book, and she apparently has another series going on that I haven't read, but people are eagerly awaiting the next installment. But then she comes out with this massive book, and everyone was super surprised but really excited, and I just think that it is going to be epic because it has dragons. It is like 800 pages long, and I love a good long epic fantasy, so this is going to be right up my alley. Moving on to March, on the 7th, we have The Quiet at the End of the World by Lauren James. There are two scavengers that get thrust into a plot that they had no idea about and they have no idea how to handle, and I like that idea. The initial premise of the plot is that there has been something that's happened to the world that has caused infertility, and there are these two kids who are the youngest people left alive, and they basically just live their lives scavenging and going about their business, but they end up being brought into a plot that they have to make the choice of whether or not to save, who to sacrifice, and it's just something that they obviously never thought that they would be involved in, so I just think that that is a very interesting idea. Moving on to April, on the 2nd we have Wicked Saints coming out by Emily Duncan. I'm excited about this one because it just sounds so epic. You have gods and saints being brought into the fold, you have some seemingly well-developed characters that are coming together, and it just sounds really interesting. And I really like that idea with those different walks of life coming together to achieve a common goal. And the fact that we are bringing in gods and saints is very intriguing. On April 23rd, we have the release of The Tiger at Midnight by Swati Tilhala. And what really intrigued me about this book is that it's based on Hindu and Indian mythology, which is something that I haven't really delved too much into. So I think that it is going to be a very interesting read in that respect. There's going to be action and romance, and it really sounds like the choices that our main characters are going to have to make can become utterly heartbreaking, and I am all for it. So we have this girl assassin, which what's not to love about that, and a boy soldier, and their paths end up crossing during this sort of waging war that has been happening, and the decisions that they have to make, like I said, sound like they can be utterly heartbreaking. So I can't wait to see what comes of it. On May 7th, we actually just recently got the cover release for this book, but it is Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I'm excited for this one because Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, they are a powerhouse writing team, and what they did with the Illuminae Files series was just so spectacular. I can't wait to see what they do with their next project. So Aurora Rising also has a ragtag group of characters that come together. You have the star pupil of the academy who gets to pick his own crew, but it doesn't end up going exactly according to plan. And then in the process of all of this, someone sort of comes into fruition and sort of just turns everything on its head and messes everything up, and this group, who isn't quite as good as the star pupil was hoping, ends up being the crew that everyone looks to save everyone, essentially. So I feel like this one is going to be an insane ride. And on May 26th, we have Sky Without Stars by Jessica Brody and Joanne Rendell. I am excited about this one because it is a reimagining of Les Mis. That's all I needed to know. As soon as I saw that, I thought, yep, I have to read this one. The whole French Revolution in Paris is something that really intrigues me, and I absolutely love Les Mis, and if you can give me a reimagining of that and make it a little bit less of a tome than the actual Les Mis is, then I am eager to read it. So that is one, like I said, as soon as I heard it, I needed to add it to my list. Moving on to June, on the 4th, we have Shadow and Flame by Mindy Arnett. And this is the sequel and the last book for the duology that started with Onyx and Ivory, which was released in 2018, and I really enjoyed it. We are moving on to Rebellion, and I am so excited. I'm not going to delve into really what the second book is going to be about, just for spoilers, but I really fell in love with the characters and the plot of the first book, Onyx and Ivory. It was such a well-realized world that touched on a lot of points that are pertinent even to life now, even though it's set in a fantasy realm. But I really did enjoy it. I loved the magic system. I loved the relationship between Kate and Corwin. I just thought that it was really well developed and had a lot of history that you could really emulate with the characters. So I can't wait to continue on with that story, with their journey, and see what happens next. On June 11th, we have Stronger Than a Bronze Dragon by Mary Fan. This one had me at mechanical dragons. So apparently in this book there are mechanical dragons. Our lead character sounds like she's gonna have such an epic journey and an epic story, and also there is the hint of a budding romance with a thief. I mean, what's not to love about that? So in order to save her people from like terror, basically, our main character, she ends up marrying the king, the prince, the viscount, however he ends up being told in this story, and she basically gives up her life of her own choices to the cause, but secretly she is also working undercover in order to get a certain something that she butts heads with a thief who is also trying to get it. So they end up figuring out that they each need it for their own reasons, but their own reasons might be a little bit more related than they thought. So, oh, this one's gonna be so good. I cannot wait. I keep saying that, but I really can't. I mean, this is getting into June now, so it's gonna be like 6 months away, guys. And on June 25th, we have Soul of the Sword by Julie Kagawa. This is book 2, and it started with Shadow of the Fox, which came out in 2018, and I absolutely loved. I really need to know what goes on in the next book because the first book just fully immersed me into the world. It was just incessant. I could not get over how much I adored it and how it still sits with me and resonates with me now, because really when I was reading it, I felt like I was watching an anime, and the journey that the characters take and the secrets that they keep from each other, but also just having this really genuine relationship, I loved. So I can't wait to see what happens next because my heart was a little bit broken at the end of the first one. So I really want to know what happens. The first book, Shadow of the Fox, if you have not heard yet, is all about this girl who is also a kitsune, which is a shapeshifter fox kind of person, and she ends up being entrusted with a piece of a sacred scroll where every 1,000 years the great dragon will grant one wish to a person who holds the scroll, but in the past it has fallen into some not so good hands. So the scroll has been split up and sent away into different parts of the world, so then that way whoever finds it is going to have to put a lot of effort into finding it, but this girl ends up having to take this scroll to another sanctuary, and along the way runs into a soldier who has been tasked to find all the pieces of the scroll, but he doesn't know that she has a piece, and he basically uses her, but she also uses him, and they just go on this amazing journey together, and I loved it. For August, the only book so far that I have coming out is on the 26th, and that is These Divided Shores by Sarah Rosh. And it is the second book after These Rebel Waves, which came out in 2018, and I have reread so many times already because I absolutely loved it, and that ending also had me a bit heartbroken, and I need to know what happens next. In These Rebel Waves, we have 3 main characters, so 3 different points of views. One is a politician, one is a prince, and one is a pirate. But in their world, there is this rebellion that is happening after there has been a time of peace since a big war. And now there is the risk of that war sort of striking up anew because of events that happened at the start of the first book. So the whole idea behind the first book is that these characters need to find a way to stop the war, but they end up being thrust into all of these different things that happen to them, and it's just such an epic journey. And I love that there's pirates, and I love that each of the characters is flawed and they have their own issues and they're dealing with their own things, but also they need to come together in a way, but there are like twists and turns that happen, and the ending just blew my mind, and I need this second book. I need it as soon as possible. I need it. And moving on to September, on the 3rd, we have The Girl the Sea Gave Back by Adrienne Young. And this was recently announced because we did not think that we would get another book in the Sky of the Deep series, which we won't. I mean, Sky in the Deep is its own standalone book, sadly, but there is a companion book coming out. There isn't a lot of information released about it, so I'm just gonna keep my ears peeled for that, but I loved that world that Adrienne Young created. She put a lot of thought into it, so I'm really glad that she gets to return to it as a writer and as a creator, and I can't wait to see what else comes of it. And lastly, because I need to make an end to this somewhere, is a book coming out next year that I don't have a release date for, but the cover was just released and it is gorgeous. But that is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare, and this is following after my favorite of the Shadowhunter books, the Infernal Devices series. I absolutely love Will and Tessa and their story and their journey, and this follows after that. So I'm excited to see what descendants are going to be there, how it's going to tie in with the rest of the Shadowhunter universe, and this one is going to be so good because really it's been my favorite. I haven't really delved too deeply into Dark Artifices, because I just love the Victorian era steampunk style shadow hunters, and obviously Will. I absolutely love Will, but I need more of that sort of version of the shadow hunters in my life, and I'm excited to be getting it next year. Wow, okay, so I feel like I'm gonna lose my voice because I've been talking for ages about these books. I know that there are a ton that I have missed, but if there are any books that are coming out in 2019 that you are excited for, please leave them in the comments down below and then I can add them to my list. And if you want to know more about what is on my list, go to my Goodreads. I put all my social media links down in the description down below. So click on it and then head on over and follow me on Goodreads. Check it out because I do have my books that I want to read sort of separated between 2019, and then I do also have a book already coming out in 2020 that I want to read. So if you want to stay on track with me with what I am interested in, definitely give me a follow. And be sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more content. I do put out new videos every weekend, and until next time, keep reading.